so beautiful, and I tell her every day.
iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max versus the S25 Ultra. This is the one that a lot of people seemingly care about. The 2025 flagship iPhone versus the 2025 flagship Samsung. And there really is only one correct answer here. Now, it is only a matter of months until the 2026 flagship S26 Ultra makes its appearance now in around about January or February next year. But just for now, I wanted to look at what the best of Apple and Samsung have to offer right now. Now, this review or comparison or whatever you want to call it, it is for normal people. And I'll say it again for the people at the back because I don't care about benchmarks. I don't care about pixel by pixel comparisons between phones. I just care about, does this phone work? Does it do what I need it to do? And which one gives you the best bang for your buck? Now, starting off with the hardware. Now, I will be quite honest. I kind of don't really like the design of the new iPhone. This whole like huge plateau thing at the top. Not a huge fan of the whole two-tone thing on the back there. But they had me at orange. The orange looks so good. I know it's a very like Marmite color. You either love it or you hate it. But I do think every brand could learn from having brighter colors. We've been having these muted like off-white colors and silver colors and gray colors for years and years. Even Samsung with their S25 and S24 and everything before that, they're all very muted. It's all kind of pastel colors and nothing really bright and bold. I guess the Pixels were the only ones that previously had bold colors. Again, those have gone pretty average nowadays. So yeah, having a very strong and bold color like this is very nice. The other thing that feels a bit weird saying, but Apple actually has more customizability, if you call it that. They have more buttons than Samsung, and they're actually useful. You've got the, the action button, which you can customize to doing anything you really want, launching apps, doing certain tasks, muting, all those kind of things. You also have the camera control button, which you're meant to be able to use to take photos and control things. But if you just use it as a quick way to launch the camera app, that's great. You've also got the double tap the power button to Apple Pay, which is very useful. And then you have some front screen shortcuts as well. So you've got quite a few extra options and buttons and ways to do things that you just don't have on the Samsung. Now, one of the biggest changes this year, though, is the change from titanium on the iPhone 16 series to aluminium on the iPhone 17 series, because they say the new A19 Pro chips need much better like thermal management to keep the phones cool. Even though the S25 Ultra runs the Snapdragon 8 Elite chip, also has vapor chamber cooling, and is made of titanium. So one thing you might want to do this year, if you choose the iPhone 17, is to pick up a case from the sponsor of this video, Pitaka. Now, I've actually chosen to run with a Pitaka case for my iPhone 17 Pro this year, as I was so close to going caseless, but with just how easy these things scratch. I've seen all the footage from the Apple stores. I did decide to go for an ultra slim case instead. So this is the sunset color. There's also Moonrise, which are made from this aerospace grade aramid fiber, which is woven into this like beautiful color that fits really well actually with the cosmic orange iPhone. It is a case that legitimately barely feels like you have a case on, but adds that vital protection against scratches and minor drops. It also completely solves the camera wobble that you get when you put this phone down. So that's an extra bonus. And speaking of the camera, they are calling this hitter tap, which protects the camera control button while still letting you, slide and tap and all the good stuff. But for me personally, it's actually reduced the number of times I accidentally open the camera up when picking my phone up. Now it is 100% MagSafe compatible. It is scratch resistant, and you can get 10% off by following the link in the description down below. Now next, in terms of the hardware and the design, is the display. And this year we have an anti-glare display on the iPhone, except I don't really think it is an anti-glare display. It's one of these weird things that, so if I put these side by side, and you can clearly see there's like a light there on the iPhone. On the Samsung, you can't really. It's just like you see there's a bit of a kind of light reflection, but you can't make out the object. And I have this like with every phone that I'm looking at the moment this year, is that the anti-glare reflective coating on a lot of them, like you can see there, these two phones here, there's obviously something reflecting. And when you put this against an iPhone 16, it's barely noticeable. So even though there is this anti-glare reflective display thing on the iPhone 17 series this year, it's not really anything. Maybe it reduces it by like 5%, 10%, something. Again, the S25 Ultra, showing this around the studio, there's some bright lights behind me and in front of me, and you can kind of tell they're there. Look, you can see that, there's a light there that's kind of focused on it. But compare this to the iPhone, if I can get the same. There we go, look, straight away, there's obviously, there's like a mirror compared to the S25 Ultra. So that is something they need to work on. What I will say though, and this is comparing the 17 Pro, not the Pro Max, versus the S25 Ultra, is that I'm a much bigger fan of smaller Pro phones. This S25 Ultra does feel a bit of a weapon when it's in your hand. It's very, very large, quite uncomfortable because of the size mostly. I find this a lot of the time. If you're, carrying other things with your hands or, holding on to children or something along those lines, then trying to use one hand with this phone can be quite a stretch. Sometimes you have to really finger gymnastics to try and reach the corners. Whereas on the smaller iPhone, at least we have the option of that smaller phone while still retaining all of the pro level features from that series of phone. It's the same phone, it's just slightly smaller version. And I wish they did something like that with the Samsung series. You got the S25, but you lose a ton of the features. And then, of course, you have the performance of the phones. Now, we're running the A19 Pro chip in the iPhone 17 series this year, or the Pro series, and we have the Snapdragon 8 Elite chip in the S25 Ultra. We've just heard about the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5, I think it is, which are probably going to be in the S26 Ultra series. But as far as the chips and the performance goes, they're both great. Again, this is like the whole not benchmarking, not putting them side by side. So I will say that as far as the chips themselves go, these both perform very, very well in pretty much all aspects, in gaming, productivity, day-to-day, just general use. I'm not finding any issues with the phone slowing down whatsoever. We're definitely at the level, particularly with these two phones, where that's not an issue. That's not anything worth discussing because nobody's going to notice unless you put a benchmark test on it, and then you're going to argue about a few digits difference, which, come on. The main difference though, of course, is the whole iOS versus One UI, and that is by far the biggest thing. So let's try and tackle this one, because you have a lot of different features with these phones, although they are getting closer and closer every year as they both copy features from each other. Now you have universal back gesture on the Samsung phone, which is something that is missing a lot from the iPhone. The iPhone, I find you have to really know where to go in some apps. So when you're, viewing photos in some apps, you have to minimize the photo, and then you see the option to then go back. Sometimes you can swipe back. Sometimes if you swipe back, you actually get a menu pop in from the side. Whereas with Android, it is, that universal back gesture is you swipe from either side and it goes back regardless of where you are or what you're doing. It always works. With that said, there are a lot of quirks I find on the iPhone as well. Whether you call them quirks or bugs is if you are in landscape and then pull down the control center and then try and move to portraits, that is a thing that does get stuck and it's kind of a bit of a bug. Maybe it should be done better, but equally, it's one of those just kind of that's just it's always happened. Is it really a problem? And again, I'm trying not to get picky because I find a lot of people get really picky with these things and get really frustrated when it's just you just learn that's a thing and you just work around it all the time. Now, the issue with the Pro versus the Pro Max iPhone, again, talking about how much I like the smaller size, is that as you get the Pro Max version, it doesn't affect the sizing of things on screen. So if you get a bigger iPhone, then the icons basically are just that much bigger. You don't get any extra screen, real estate, extra space. You can't use an extra row of icons down the bottom. And that is where obviously the Samsung and pretty much Android in general just wins overall. In terms of customization, you can get so much more from these phones. You can customize the number of rows and columns and how big the icons are, whether they're round or square or hexagonal. You can download apps that then allow you to customize things further. And so there is just so much more customizability with Samsung phones, with the S25 Ultra, and with just Android in general. And something else, one more for the whole iOS versus Android thing. I've just come back from traveling, and one thing I do love about the Samsung is that on the always on display, you can have a dual time zone. So if you are traveling, you can always have your home time zone and the location where you're currently at showing on your screen, whereas the iPhone doesn't do that, it just shows you the local time. So it's more difficult to keep up with your family or know kind of what time it is where your family is. Now, the next big difference between these two phones is Siri versus Gemini. And you might have seen my video on this already. I'll link it down below if not. But Gemini wipes the floor with Siri pretty much every time. There's very, very, very few things that Siri can do that Gemini can't already do better and have been doing for much longer. There are few things that are astoundingly better on Android, like editing photos. And again, these aren't things that I do that often, but when you do them, you realize how far behind Apple are. So take a photo, try and edit out or delete something on an Android phone, and it works so well. You can be very hard pushed to know that it's been edited and, an object's been removed. On iPhone, it just makes a mess of it. I don't know. Now, the iPhone is doing all the processing on device. Yes. So it's privacy and all that stuff. Good. But you can't use the photos that it edits. It doesn't do a very good job unless you're trying to remove, I don't know, a speck of dust or a dot or something on somebody. Whereas with this on the S25 Ultra, you can remove like the test is holding your face up, your hand up in front of your face, and then removing your hand, and it uses Android's AI or Samsung AI or Galaxy AI, whatever we're using today, to rebuild your face, and it looks pretty accurate. Now, yes, it does go online. It uses that kind of data processing in the cloud to do that. So it's going to have more access to powerful models that go, oh, I think there's a face there. Let's try and rebuild the face. And, oh, I think that's a chair. Let's gonna make the chair look like what a chair should look like. So yes, but that means basically it works better. And ultimately, I don't really care if my, photos are getting processed in the cloud. It's, I'm just taking photos of random objects and like family photos where if you want to edit someone out from the background, cool. Do it, but do it on an Android because it actually works. Now, the next thing, with that said, is you can get Gemini on an iPhone. So even though Gemini has a load of features on here, so you've got things like Gemini Live, I absolutely love. So Gemini Live, you can share the camera, like a live video feed of the camera, whilst having a discussion with Gemini.
I'm wondering if I can use the swimming pool water to water the grass, but I'm not sure if the chemicals and the chlorine would damage the grass.
You could, but you might want to wait a few days after you've added chemicals to the pool so the chlorine has a chance to dissipate.
You can even get it to find objects for you. You can give it a kind of a show the camera around and say, oh, where's the thing? And it will tell you where the thing is.
Quick question. Do you know where I left my Google Pixel Bud Pro 2s?
Yes, I do. Your Google Pixel Buds Pro 2 box is sitting right there on the coffee table next to the Lego Fortnite llama. Can you see it?
Yes. All of that is available on an iPhone. So you can kind of get all of the good things on Android AI, or Gemini at least, on an iPhone. And I'm a big fan of actually remapping the action button up here to just launching a Gemini live session because it's so much better than the, I can't even remember what they call it now, but you tap and hold the camera button, Apple Intelligence or Visual Intelligence, which basically takes a photo and then you can tap and ask ChatGPT things. But yeah, just fundamentally, Gemini and Android AI and Galaxy AI and basically anything Android AI is currently head over heels better than Apple's AI, Apple Intelligence, which isn't very intelligent.
Designed for Apple Intelligence from the ground up.
And then we have one of the most important reasons why people choose either of these phones, the cameras. Now, I don't know about you, but Nobody I know is actually taking photos at like 100 times zoom on the S25 Ultra or even 40 times zoom on the iPhone. It is one of these totally like unrealistic things that other tech creators constantly pick holes over. Which can take the best super zoomed in photo when none of them are actually usable. You're not going to take one of those photos and put it on your wall as artwork or anything, or maybe like weird artwork, but you're not going to save them into your family album to remember that treasured memory 20 years later, not from a like 100 times or 40 times photo. So both cameras are incredible. If you have the S25 Ultra, you have one of the best cameras in a phone. If you have the iPhone 17, you have one of the best cameras in a phone. And for just capturing like day-to-day memories, my kids, my wife, magical moments, like stuff that I'm going to look back on in 15, 20, 30 years time, and I'm going to relive those moments once more. Like not once am I going to complain that the image isn't sharp enough, or, oh, it would have been better if I used a Samsung or a Pixel or a different phone, like whatever it is. But there are some differences and things I have noticed that I do care about over time. So with the Samsung, I get more photos where the focus misses the subject, but you can then go and correct a lot of these after. You just edit the photo and change the point of focus. So kind of a non-issue if you remember to go and do that. And when taking a photo and like zooming in and out between lenses, on the iPhone, it's definitely smoother. And with the Samsung, there is a noticeable shift in color when you do switch from like the ultra wide camera. That can be quite annoying in some situations, like big areas of green grass or bright blue sky where you notice the color shift. And for this year, of course, the iPhone's front-facing camera definitely wins out with its new square sensor that lets you shoot both portrait and landscape for both photos and videos without moving the phone around with you, with like Apple Intelligence framing. So if it knows when to shoot wider when like multiple people enter the frame, it's just a really nice upgrade and one that I'm sure we're going to start seeing in pretty much every other Android phone as of next year. Onto battery and charging now. So the S25 Ultra charges faster with wire charging. The iPhone surprisingly charges faster with wireless Qi 2 charging. Now, I do feel that battery life is better on the iPhone day to day. It's been really on and off with the Samsung depending on the latest software update. We've had some good months, we've had some bad months, but you do also get adaptive power mode on the iPhone, which kind of learns and improves as things go on, similar to adaptive power management on Android phones. Generally speaking, I would say that they're probably about the same. If you're really going to get nitpicky, then maybe one will pull ahead of the other depending on your use case. But for my use case, I find the iPhone marginally, like just about pulls ahead of the Samsung in terms of battery life. Again, depending on the software update, and maybe iOS 26, the next update will crush that on the iPhones. Who knows? What I will say though is you have, of course, built-in MagSafe on the iPhone, which is a bonus. You don't have it built in yet on the S25 Ultra, although you can put a case on that has MagSafe so you can use all the magnetic chargers. I just love this for things like charging in the car. I've got an ESR car charger where I just literally stick it to my car and it works fantastically. So that's really, really useful. But now on to what sets them apart, because these phones are very, very good. They're both very similar in very kind of similar ways, but they are both very different in their own ways as well. So on the Android side of things first, we of course have the S Pen. Now, I don't personally use the S Pen. I would actually be much better off if they got rid of the S Pen and then made the phone slightly smaller or a slightly larger battery. I'd happily take that. But I know a lot of people use the S Pen, they sign contracts or draw little notes or scribble things down. I will say my daughter and my son love the S Pen. Like whenever we're out and about, still to this day, if I'm not carrying around the S25 Ultra and I'm using a different phone, they'll ask me like, can I draw on that one? It's like, no, I'm sorry, this doesn't have an S Pen, sorry. So the S Pen is loved by my kids and loved by a lot of people. I personally don't use it, but it's there. Likewise with DeX. So DeX allows you to plug your device into a full-on monitor. You can Bluetooth a keyboard and mouse to it and basically use like a full-on desktop computer powered by your phone, because these things are so powerful, they can kind of do that nowadays. Again, I don't really use this because generally I'm either near enough to my laptop. Like I don't go out thinking I'm going to need to multitask and use a keyboard, mouse and monitor, so I'm going to take my phone. I think I should probably throw my laptop in the bag or maybe a tablet. So one of those features, again, DeX is very useful for those people who use it. Me, personally, I haven't really used it a huge amount. And then one of the other benefits, of course, with the Android system currently, because this is changing, is you can sideload apps. So you can do things like, at least here, the Epic Game Store. So I can play Fortnite on my Android phone, whereas I can't because you have to sit within the walled garden of Apple where you cannot currently play Fortnite on your iPhone. It's coming soon, at least here in the UK. So I know it's available outside of the UK because good old UK law. But it's currently much easier to get other apps sideloaded onto your Android phone. However, with a recent update, it looks like Android is getting to be more like iPhone, where they're going to restrict apps down to the Play Store only. So that might not live much longer than that. Then we go over to the iPhone. And the iPhone, of course, has its own set of rules and benefits. Of course, being the ecosystem is always the big one that everyone comments about. The iPhone ecosystem. Things like AirDrop, where you can just seamlessly send files and videos back and forth between laptops, tablets, computers, friends' phones. It's much, much easier to do that. You do have Quick Send on the Android side of things, but again, it just depends on which ecosystem you're in. And I do find that most people tend to have like a MacBook alongside their iPhone. Even a MacBook alongside an Android phone works well. There's just apps you can download to kind of bridge that gap, but it's still nonetheless part of the whole Apple ecosystem thing. I do also like the lock screen on the iPhone side of things, where you can have rotatable like family photos. I can basically pick from my photo library and say, I want some wallpapers with just my wife, just my kids, and I can add a 3D depth effect to them as well, which makes it look so cool. Like when you kind of tilt the phone, you can see like a bit of it like 3D effect going on. And again, it rotates those images, so throughout the day, if I just tap the screen, it changes, and I can just again like relive old memories when my kids were like younger, or we were on a family holiday somewhere. It's just such a nice thing. You could do something close to it on Android, but it just looks so much better on the iPhone side of things. Dynamic Island. I just came back from a Xiaomi event where they announced Hyper Island, which is by no means a pretty much like-for-like copy of the Dynamic Island. It's one of these features where, Android's getting that now. So the iPhone for now does have Dynamic Island, which I like. I like the Dynamic Island. I like its use cases. Again, I just came back from a flight, and having apps like Flighty allowed me to, see my flight details up in the Dynamic Island without having to go in and open an app every single time. But having said that, I do also prefer the pinhole camera on the Android side of things and on the S25 Ultra, because you don't have this massive black bar taking up the screen all the time. So, give and take, just depends on your preference here. Now, instead of the Dynamic Islands on the iPhone, you do have the Now bar on the Android side of things and on the S25 Ultra. I don't find that it works as well. So the Now bar you can kind of see it down the bottom here. It appears down the bottom. It also gives you like the daily briefings and things like that, but doesn't really give you much. It's just a bit of a feed of here's the weather, here's your calendar, and here's how you slept last night. So not a huge amount of data, but nonetheless, it's one of the features that some people again find useful. You've also got the whole watch side of things, and the Apple Watch in particular is one that I find a lot of people really struggle with when they try and move away from the Apple ecosystem. I've worn one for many years, and then I stopped and switched over to Garmin, and I love the Garmin watches now. Like this is the Garmin Fenix 8. It lasts 2 weeks on battery. Fantastic. Very good. I'm now trying to go back to the Apple Watch just to see what it's like for a video. That's coming up soon. But the watch is one that keeps people coming back to the Apple ecosystem every time. They pick up an Android phone and they go like, I don't like the watches, so let's go back to iPhone. And then still we are seeing this day to day in just iPhone in general, is that apps are still developed first and foremost for iPhone, because you can develop for iPhone and reach a huge audience of people, whereas on Android you have to develop one specific app for like the S25 Ultra, and then you have to kind of cater for things like flippables and foldables and big screens and small screens and tablets, which is a bit frustrating because, for example, that Flighty app that I use is currently iOS only. I'm also using Fantastical, which is iPhone only. So trying to find apps that are cross-compatible is really difficult, and I'm having to move a lot of my apps from iPhone only apps over to Android apps, or rather, cross-compatible apps. Video, again, coming up on that very soon. And then we have like one of the big ones, I guess, which is the pricing. And one thing to take into consideration here, I would say, is the upgradability, let's call it. Because something I have noticed a lot over time is that Android phones do tend to devalue themselves fairly quickly. And one of the reasons for this is that once the phone launches, whether it's a Samsung phone, whether it's a Pixel, the Samsung themselves will then typically discount their own phones a few weeks, a few months later. They'll run deals on them where you get a free watch or free earbuds, or they will throw things in to try and get you to buy their devices, whereas Apple holds their price all year round. Like up until the day before the iPhone 17 launched, you could spend the same amount of money and buy an iPhone 16. And so iPhones do tend to hold their value. So if you are looking to upgrade every single year, you will generally get more back for your iPhone, so you can then upgrade every single year, and it generally costs you less because you've got more money back for your iPhone. Whereas on Android, I think the Fold 7 is probably down to be under $1,000 right now on a used market, which is just nuts because it's like a $2,000 phone. So in terms of pricing, I think if regardless of how much the phones cost, if you are looking at sticking within one of these ecosystems, let's call it, for a while, then the iPhone I think does win out here as well. But that doesn't take away from the Android possibly being the better phone overall. Now in terms of support and warranty, let's cover this because I've had so many questions whenever I've covered Android or iPhone. The question of warranty always comes up, and I will say that the iPhone's warranty experience is going to be the most consistently good because it is pretty much the same worldwide as far as I'm aware from what I've experienced. Whereas on the Samsung side of things, the support experience varies widely from where you live. Here in the UK, we don't have any Samsung stores. I think there's maybe like one or two, maybe one in central London. But to get support from Samsung, it normally involves me sending the device away, waiting a few days, sometimes even weeks when I've tried this before, and then the device may or may not come back. I've had to chase quite a few times. And so just the overall support experience hasn't been very good with Samsung for me personally. But I know there are other places in the world where you can literally walk into a Samsung store and get it fixed like there and then, get it back, and it's just as good as the Apple experience. However, I will also add on to this that most recently, with some of the products we bought from Samsung, I had to return one of them, and they wanted to charge me like a 10% fee because I'd opened it, and then like they also wanted to charge like a restocking fee as well. So like I tried to buy something and I had to pay hundreds in fees to return something. So I'm not a huge fan of that. If I've bought something and changed my mind, we have distance regulations here, which means we can return within 2 weeks for a full refund. Samsung doesn't seem to apply to them for some reason. So that was a long video. So the answer to the question that I set up at the beginning of this video, which phone is the obvious choice here? And the answer is buy whichever frickin' phone you want. This is seriously it. Like, quit bitching and moaning about which phone everyone else is using and get the one that you enjoy using the most. Like, buy the one you can afford, the one you think will capture your family moments and make it easier to share with your partners and your friends, the one that makes it effortless for you to pay, to work out, to listen to music. I've captured some of my best and most treasured moments on my S25 Ultra, before that the S24 Ultra. I've captured even more on the iPhone that I've owned before that for like decades, spending time with my kids and just seeing them grow up and turn into the incredible people they are becoming. It is just a wonderful thing, and one that I'm forever going to be grateful for, being able to carry around something this powerful in our pockets. So until the next one.
And I will try.